Hey guys, welcome to the Scholar Online YouTube channel, the channel that is all about learning. And lately we've been doing a lot of AI, API learning, okay? And we're going to continue right on that theme here today. So, today I'm going to do something really exciting. Similar to what I did last week and picking off from, I think, two months ago or a month ago video where we were building our own ChatGPT application. And what we're going to do with that ChatGPT application is I'm going to show you how to customize it with your own data. I will even show you how to have a place where you can upload the documents directly and immediately have it trained to use that information to answer your responses. So this is really exciting stuff, and I hope we'll get through all of it today, but make sure to watch until the end of the video because you're going to learn something really exciting. And what I'm teaching you in this channel today is something you can take and go build your own application with it, make money, and start learning and sort of growing the whole AI field. All right, so knowledge is free on this channel, okay? What is not always free is the code, but today I'm going to help you out, and so you can say thank me later, but I'm going to provide you with the starting up code. And the startup code is going to be the code of where we left off the last time. However, I don't want you to go and just copy and paste that code if you don't understand it. I'd actually like you to go and watch that video. So this is the video where we built our initial ChatGPT application. This application over here. So this application is basically replicating everything that you see on the ChatGPT platform right now, and it's using GPT 3.5 Turbo engine in the background to answer specific questions. So you can say things like, this is my favorite question. What is the currency in Timbuktu? This is a very generic question. You can ask ChatGPT. We've got a ChatGPT engine running in the background with the API, and it's going and talking to the API, and it brings us sort of like the response. And this application, I'm going to give you the code to this so that at least you have a working starting point. But before you just copy and paste that code, I really want you to go and have a look at this video. I'm going to link this video in the description below. I'm not a believer of just copying and pasting code if you don't know what you're copying and pasting. All right, you need to understand what's in that video. We spent a lot of time building this application from scratch, showing you how to do the code. This is why I don't generally make the code available, because I want people to go through the motion of building the code, because that's how you learn. You'll never learn by copying and pasting code, right? I want you to read through it, look at what I'm doing, test it. I want you to get errors, and then take those errors, put them in online and look for Stack Overflow and get answers, ask around and solve your problems. This is how I became a good developer, by building things myself and not relying on other people's code. Nonetheless, watch this video. I will link it in the description below. Build this from scratch, and if you have issues building this from scratch, then you can go and have a look at the startup code that I will give you. I will put a link to the GitHub in the description of the video. Now, I say the description of the video is scroll to the bottom of the video that you're watching, and under that description panel, just click anywhere on it and it will open up. And when I say I will link something in the description, I will link it over there. So I will link the GitHub code. I will link the previous link to the previous video, because I want you to actually watch it so that you get your application to this point, so that you have a working ChatGPT application that is not trained on any specific data. And then we're going to take this application and then we're going to add our own information, and we're going to train it. We're going to train it with our own information, or not really train it. We're going to embed our own information so that it searches our information to answer our questions. We're not really training anything yet. Of course, there is a training step that comes later, especially when you're using your own information, because you always want to make sure that it answers the way you want. But we're not going to cover training for today, because I think with very basic documentation, it still produces decent answers without additional training. Right? So we're not going into building a complex model. So I will link all of that below, and I would put timestamps as well. So use those timestamps to forward back through, don't watch this like you're watching a Netflix movie. Watch this video like you're learning. Pull up your laptop and go through the steps with me and do what I do as I do. Then you will not be asking me for code, because you will be writing the code yourself. And when you have errors, don't write me an email with your error. Go and research that error, copy and paste that error online and look for solutions. Trust me, you will find 5 other people with the same error, and somebody online would have answered that question and fix your problem. That is the only way you learn. All right, so let's go through the admin of the video. Remember to like this video, like it, because liking videos on my channel helps me a lot. It helps the video stay up, and when people search for similar things, it helps the video get featured. And remember as well to leave a comment if there's something you don't understand. But as usual, I'm going to remind you, be nice with your comments. All right, so I will leave that here, and maybe we'll come back to it later, or I think we're done with this. So basically, this is our ChatGPT application that we built previously. I'm going to ask it a very specific question, right? And I'm going to ask it, who is Bertha Hoko? That's my name, by the way. Let's see if ChatGPT knows who is Bertha Hoko. I'm sorry, I do not have enough information to identify who Bertha Hoko is. Can you please provide me with more context and details about her? All right, so ChatGPT doesn't know who I am. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to embed my CV into ChatGPT, so that the next time I ask it, who is Bertha Hokong, it will be able to answer me based on the information that I'm going to give it to train it. So there's a lot of steps in this video, and I want you to feel free to pause, watch a section of the video again, go back to certain things, use the timestamps to go back and forth through, because there's a lot of steps and you have to get all of them right. If you miss one step in the beginning and you fast forward to the end, you might find that your app doesn't work, because you have to follow the steps at a time and make sure that everything works as you get past the first step into the next one. Everything works. Okay, so the steps are as follows, very, very high level: how to build your own ChatGPT model. I did a similar video last week, but I was using LLMA index and so forth, and this week I'm not going to do that. This week I'm going to use the cookbook from OpenAI, which is available on their GitHub, and I will also link this for you in the description below. So on their GitHub, they've got what they call the OpenAI Cookbook. And the OpenAI Cookbook is sort of like a list of examples of OpenAI applications that you can build, right? And if you click over here under the OpenAI Cookbooks apps, they've got 3 apps that they have made available. And the one we're going to be using is the Chatbot-Kickstarter, all right? This is a Chatbot-Kickstarter, but it is a Streamlit app, right? So we're not going to be building the Streamlit app, but if you want, this code is actually very well written and very easy to understand. And if you just follow the steps exactly as they are written here, and you pull this repository and you follow the steps, it's going to work. I've tried it and it worked exactly as it's described. It's one of those repos that's well done, and you're not going to have issues with it. But we're not going to use a repo as is, because remember, this repo is built on a Streamlit application. It's Python, so I'm very happy that a lot of the OpenAI stuff is already in Python, which is my language of choice. But Streamlit is different. We're not going to be working with Streamlit because we are building our application on, remember, our virtual private server, which is a Linux server online. And everybody always asks me, why are you using Linux server? Because these guys here, actually, if you look at the application, they're doing this on a notebook, on a Jupyter notebook, which is almost easier to follow the steps that are written in a Jupyter notebook. But I'm not going to do this, because I always tell people in my channel that the reason why I've used my method of programming is because I build applications that are ready to deploy. So by the time you're done with my application, you can literally click a button or follow my deployment guide and put that application online and have it work and deploy it. You understand? So I build applications for production, and I use productions level architecture, or the type of scenario, or the type of architecture that is easily upgradable to a production level. I know I'm using Flask now, and Flask is not ideal for production. I know, because I would use Django, for example, if I really wanted to like use build an application that I'm going to make money out of it. But the reason why I went with Flask this specific time was because I wanted to simplify the process of building the application so that you can focus on the technical detail behind the application. So you don't focus on building a Django app, but rather you focus on the technical capabilities of using the OpenAI API. Once you understand the technical capabilities of using an OpenAI API, it's very easy to then combine this knowledge with the knowledge of building a Django application. And if you look at our YouTube channel, my channel, for example, just search through my videos. I have lots and lots of video tutorial series on Django applications, basic Django applications, CRM Django applications. I mean, I've built all the Django applications that can be built. So have a look at those Django applications, and then you can take the basic knowledge from this and integrate it into that. It will still work, all right? And maybe in future, I will do this on Django. But today I'm doing it on Flask because I want to focus on the specific elements of this type of application. So you don't worry about, building the Django app, but instead focus on working with the OpenAI API instead. You understand? So I know it's a bit of a long introduction, but I have to clarify these things, and it's very important for you to understand what I'm clarifying so that you can go into this. This is a very detailed learning channel. That's why my videos are long, 2-3 hours, because I'm here to teach you the basics and the details of actually being a good developer. Now let's get back into it. So if you refresh this, you'll see it goes back to scratch. There's no database functionality. There's no, this app doesn't even remember the conversation. We're not even building a chat that remembers conversation. And I'm going to eliminate all of that because I really want to simplify this application for you. All right. So there's no ability to remember the chat. There is no database to save. There's no even there's no like logging in and authentication and keeping track of whose account is who yet, right? Because now we're just focusing on the detail. Later on, I'll do a Django app, and perhaps I will add all of those details: authentication, and the ability to remember, and the ability to actually have a conversation where the previous prompt is remembered and saved inside of a class, inside of a model, so that the next time you ask the next question, you can, the chat still remembers what you previously asked and what you previously said, so it can have an actual conversation. So right now, we're not really doing that. We're just sort of like showing you how to just use data that you have given the ChatGPT to train it, okay? So to get started, like I said, we're going to be using the cookbook. And I will link this in the description below as well, the link to this specific repo. But I don't want you to just clone this repo. We're going to just take bits and pieces of the repo so that we can combine it with our own Flask application. We're not going to use the Streamlit elements of this app. We are going to combine this into our Flask instead, all right? But if you understand how we do it in Flask, you'll be able to use any other web sort of system to do this with. All right, now let's get started. There's a couple of things that we need to do. The document we're going to be using for our training is my own CV. All right, so I'm going to open it up here. This is my CV, Bertha Hokong CV, and it has everything about me, right? It's got my name, the referees, my career background, and it says this is CV for Bertha Hokong. And it's got all the information about me, where I've worked previously, and all sorts of things. So if I embed this document into ChatGPT, and the next time I ask it the same question, who's Bertha Hokong, technically it should be able to answer that question and the career history of Bertha Hokong, where did she go to school, whatever. That it should be able to answer those questions because I will embed that document. So this is our starting code. And we can close all the applications, and I'll give you a very high level of the structure of the document. The first thing is a static folder, and the static folder really doesn't have anything in it. It just has our fave icon, which is what you see at the top of the application there. We're not using any like high level stat CSS libraries. We're using bootstrap, and we're accessing it via CDN. So, the static folder is basically empty. And the templates folder, we basically just have one index.html file in there, and this is the one we built the last time. This is just what enables the form to collect the prompt from the front end and get the response via Ajax and put it back here as we are talking, right? So this is basically what this HTML form does. I'm not going to cover the details of it. You can watch that previous video that I will link to see how we built that. And then the magic happens over here where we have a function to generate a chat response. It takes in a prompt. We create the system message right there and then, and we enter in that prompt and we build the messages and we attach the messages into the OpenAI chat completion function, and it returns an answer. And obviously we do a little bit of cleaning up that answer to replace the new lines with the breaks, because we're going to display this inside of HTML. With previous experience, we found that it didn't look great without making this change. And after that, if we cannot get a response, we tell them that, okay, you cannot, you beat the AI. And there's many reasons why this can happen. This can happen if, for example, your API key is either discontinued or, you don't get the response. I've tested this so many times, and now that I've actually got a working application with thousands of people that use this, there's a lot of reasons that cause this to fail. One of each is even the type of prompt that you give it. So people are always trying to trick my system with with prompts that are just ridiculous, long prompts, copy and paste an entire book and trying to put it in there as a prompt. You'll be surprised what people do, right? And then you get an error. So there's many things that can cause an error to happen. And when that happens, just say, oops, you could always try and figure out what type of error it is by reading through the error there and then giving the appropriate error response. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to have one. If this fails, I'm just displaying one error message. And then so this is basically the engine of the AI. It's very, very simple. It's just one function that calls the API and gets a response. And of course, make sure that you have your OpenAI key pasted inside of the config file. I'm not going to show it here because I don't want to reveal my API key. And when I post this inside of the GitHub, that I will link for you, I'm going to remove my API key inside of the file. So the API key will be a blank, but the file will still be exactly the way that it is structured, so you don't have to change anything. All you need to do is to open this config.py file and look for the variable that is called OpenAI key, and then replace that string, whatever string that I'm going to have in there, replace it with your actual API key. So you need to go into OpenAI. Let me just see over there. Yeah, OpenAI keys like this one, right? And this is my API key page. I will link this for you so you can create an account, and then you can just click on the link and find the place where the API keys are, and then you can create a new key, and then you'll see the new key will be displayed for you. Just copy it and come and paste it inside of this file called config.py. That's all you have to do. That is all you have to do, and then you're good to go. So once you've done that, run the application. Run the application by saying Python app.py, the way you run the application in the virtual server. Let me just stop this one here and clear this. Right, and then let me just show you how to run the application. Just run it like that, Python app.py, and the application runs, and you go and you refresh the page, right, and just test it. Who is provide a summary of Bertha Kokong University degrees. A list of Bertha Kokong University degrees. So let's just ask that question. And of course, it's not going to know the answer to this. It's going to say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. It doesn't know this. But we're going to re-ask this question later on after we've trained it. So once you know that your application is running, then we can get started to move forward. So open that cookbook again. And once you've opened it, so this link, there's a couple of files here. There is the chat.py file. This file is a Streamlit file application. If you click on it, you will see It's a Streamlit app. It shows you, it creates a prompt over there, and it fills the prompt into the function, and it basically just enables, it does exactly the same thing that we're doing here, right? But it's doing it using a Streamlit app. So we're not going to need that. And the chatbot is also pretty much similar as well. You get the Redis connection and you do all of that, and you do that. So I'm not going to do that either. The files I'm going to start with is the config file. All right. So the config file is very, very important to understand what is in here. So there is a completions model. And you'll wonder, why do you need a completions model? Actually, we don't need a completions model specifically, but I want you to just copy and paste each and everything that is in here, right, into your config.py file. So the config.py file looks like this. I've removed my OpenAI key for now, so that you can see exactly what I want you to do in here. So I want you to copy all of that and paste it exactly the way that it is, right? It's somewhere on the bottom of the file. All right, so paste it somewhere on the bottom of the file. The completions model, DaVinci 003, leave it as that, although we're not going to use it, but do not remove it. The embeddings model, so this is the one that is used to embed the content into OpenAI. Leave it exactly as it is as well. Chat model, we're going to be using 3.5 turbo. If you want to use GPT-4, it's up to you. You can just replace this with GPT-4 if you have access to it on your API key, but I'm going to just leave it as this. The chunk size, leave it as this, but this is a variable that you can also play around with and try different chunk sizes and see which ones works better for you, because there'll be a time later on where you want to, depending on how the results come along, right? The vector field name, do not change that as well. Leave it as content vector. Now there's a prefix and an index name. The prefix and the index name are related to the database that we're going to be using. So the steps of embedding this information or being able to train the ChatGPT model includes you actually creating a database where you are going to sort of add your PDF file, but you're going to sort of break it down. I'll show you exactly how to do that. And you don't have to worry about the details of it. Just follow the code that I'm going to provide to you. But basically, the way the code works is that it takes that document and it breaks it down into certain elements. It breaks it down to tokens and certain elements that it will be able to then search through that document as a, using a certain, search functionality within that database. And the database that we'll be using is a Redis database. So you will have to have access to a Redis database. I'll show you the different options that we can use this for. This is why, again, I'd like to really, really stress that you do this inside of a virtual server, because then you can follow the steps that I'm going to do here exactly, because each virtual server is the same. And then you won't have to worry about the fact that you are creating an entire database with all sorts of things that will take up space in your personal computer. And there's options here of using Docker. And I'll show you how to use Docker if you want to use Docker. But if you want to use Docker, for example, just installing Docker alone takes a lot of space inside of your personal computer. So I do not recommend that you try and do this on your personal machine. That is why I always do this on a virtual server, which when you're tired of this project, you can just get rid of the server or something like that. So think about that. We're going to be using a Redis database. A Redis database is like it's a very highly efficient database that's very good with retrieving information, especially when you need to retrieve volumes of information. It's got, nowadays they've got the Redis what they call the Redis Stack server, which is even more advanced than the traditional Redis server. The Redis Stack server allows us to be able to do what we're doing now. So when we are doing the Redis installation, just make sure that you get the right Redis. But you follow the steps in this video, you're gonna be fine. So by the way, after all of that, what I really wanted to mention at this point is the prefix and the index name are related to the Redis server, the Redis database that we're going to be using. These are variables you can change for, by the way. So I'm going to change this and say ScholarDoc, for example. All right, I'm going to change this and say ScholarDoc, and I'm going to change this index and I'm going to say Scholar Index, for example. These are variables you can change because inside of your Redis server. You can, and by the way, you can have multiple indexes within the same database. This is also very, very important, right? So let's say you wanted to build your own application, but you wanted to be able to have multiple individuals using that application. And then you wanted individuals to store data, but inside of a sort of like their own compartment. You could create multiple indexes for different users. So this is for a use case where you had one application, one Redis database, but you don't want to create everything in one index and embed everything in one index, mixing up people's information, which means when I search the index, I could potentially find results for another person, and somebody else could find results for another person. You will want to separate the different information so that user A, when they search, they only find index that is related to user A. So for example, if you had user profiles, and maybe we'll cover this when we do the Django application, you could have the prefix being the unique ID of a specific user, and the index name also being a unique ID of a specific user, so that in future when you're looking through the indexes, you could use that unique ID to fetch the right index and the right prefix. You understand? So this is very, very important. These are things you can edit when you create the index, and you can also edit when you search the index to make sure that you're searching the right index. But if you were building your own application, this would not be important. You could still just use whatever the index name you're using, and you could put everything in one index if you're just building your personalized application for you. All right? I know I'm talking a lot, but it's important to explain these things in detail so you know what you're doing. I've closed the config.py file, so we've copied everything that's in here. Let's go back to the application. After the config.py file is the database.py. So let's open that file, and I'm going to copy everything that's in here and inside of the root of my application. That is the other thing that is very, very important. It's very, very important as you copy these folders and these files that you also copy the relation to each other. Because the way the files are built, they actually communicate with each other. You'll see a file will import another file and it will work with another. Like the database file has got all the database functions that deal with the database, but the chat file has got all the stuff that deals with the chat. But the chat file, for example, might import a function from the database file, or the search file might import a function from the database file. So, or the database might import a function from a transformers file. So it's very, very important that when you copy these files, especially if you're not going to clone the entire repository, that you maintain the relation of the files to each other and the naming as well. So don't name it something else. Name it exactly what it's named, and ensure that on the root of your project directory, the relation or the relative location of the files to each other remains unchanged. So this file is called database.py. We're going to have to create in the same place where our config.py file is. We're going to have to create a new file, and we have to call it exactly what it is called over there. So we will call it a database.py, and then we'll go over here and we will copy this content of the file and we will paste it in here. All right. So we've copied the content. By the way, I copied by clicking this button over there. All right, just copy raw contents and then come and paste it in here. You will see over here a couple of imports at the top. It imports pandas, NumPy, OpenAI, and then it imports config, right? And from config, it imports all of these things here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just leave it like that. And what I'm going to do over there is I'm going to just make sure that I have my API key ready in all the files, especially the OpenAI.api. The reason for this is there's a lot of functions that are running over here that use the API key, especially if you see import OpenAI at the top there. There are functions that are using the API key, but they'll be looking for the API key inside of the environment variables. And I'm not going to put it inside of the environment because I've saved it inside of my config file. So I'll go into my AI API and just remind myself what I did there. So I'm going to just copy what's in there, right? And make sure that I import config, and I will just underneath here, just paste that from OpenAI, do that. And in front of that, I'll just say import config. It's okay. this is not a clash. The fact that you import these from config and then you import config over there is not a problem. Otherwise, what you could do is that you could just say from config import all of this as well. You could add it to all the things you're importing like that. All right, and then you could just then you know, do it like that, right? And then you've imported it there, and then you don't need to do that there. You understand? So then this activates your OpenAI API key with that you imported out of config. But to simplify things so that you can see exactly what I'm doing and what's different from what was copied and pasted, this is added additional lines, right? So you can see the difference, so you don't get confused later on when you're watching this video as to exactly what it is I did over there. And then what I want to show you there is over here, the first function, and this is a very important function, is a function to get your Redis connection. The Redis connection is going to connect to localhost and port 6379. This is your Redis installation. So this function is not going to work until you actually install Redis, but installing Redis is very, very easy, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. And I'll show you the two methods in which you can use an easier method and an even easier method. Right, but once you've installed Redis, then this function will work just fine without an issue. And keeping track of the port that you're using when you install Redis, just double check that it is installed in the correct path. This is the default port for Redis, but this is some of the places where the error can come from. If, for example, you end up not using the default port, if the default port is being used by a different function, for example, and you change the port of Redis, just remember to change it here as well. And yeah, and there's a lot of other functions that I will not cover in great detail. You can go through it later in your own time, but the most important function which I want you to understand over here is the Redis functionality, the connection, and obviously the one here for creating an index. So this is what I was telling you about when I said that you're going to be saving information inside of different indexes inside of the Redis database. So an index is just sort of like, think about it as a repository. It's a place where you're going to add your information, and this index, when you create it, it's like a database of sorts, but it is it's a database where you're going to have a vector field, text field, and a numeric field. And these ones we are importing at the top over there from the Redis commands, and we will install Redis here before we continue. But basically this is just like, think about it as an index structure or an index, what's the right word for this? What do you call this? An index structure. Yeah, there's a word, but it's escaping me because it's early on a Saturday morning. But basically you are structuring your index to be in a certain format, so that you can then later on, after you've created that index, you can load documents into that index. When you load documents, that will be loaded into the index like this. So imagine if you're creating a table, and when you create a table, you create table headers at the top of the table, and maybe you say name, address, a phone number, email, or whatever. Those are headings of a table. And then later on, after you've created the table headings, you're going to add rows to the table. So every row that you add, you could say for row number 1, every data must fit the heading. So for where you have the name, you must put in the name of the person. Where you have the address, you put in the address of that person. Where you have where the heading says email address, you put the email address, and so forth and so forth. Later on, when you want to search that table, it's easy to say, find me the name or the email address that corresponds to a person whose name is Bertha Hogong, or find me a phone number that corresponds to a person who's whatever. So this is setting up our index because it's going to be a search index, so that later on when we are now querying the index, it will be easy for it to return our results that we're looking for based on certain context that we give it. All right, so that is the very, very high level explanation of exactly what we are trying to achieve here. All right, like you'll see the query over there. When you query it, this is the function that queries your database later on. Okay, here we are loading the vectors. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I don't want you to worry too much about that, unless if you really want to understand how the indexing works inside of Redis, you can go and read the documentation to understand that function. But it's not necessary for you to understand how it works in that detail, all right, at this stage. All right, later on, of course, you can go through those details. But this is an important function that queries the database. So what you do here is you go and you'll enter a specific query, and then you will look at the index, and then you want to find the top results that you get from there, right? And so for example, you'll the query, you will build up that query, you'll embed that query. All right, you'll see this is where the OpenAI embedding happens, and you'll see this function OpenAI embedding. This function will create an error if you had not activated the OpenAI API key. This is why it's very, very important to do it like that over there. But over here, you'll see you've got your embeddings model, and this embeddings model is the one that you are getting from the top over there, which is inside of your config file that I showed you earlier on, right? So another thing you can do, so that's very, very important. And to understand whether, and then you sort of get that query, and then you run that query, and then you get Redis results. All right, so this is querying Redis, and then over here you get the Redis results. The Redis result is obviously you need to query Redis first of all, and then to do that, but you're cleaning up now that result a little bit using the data frame and the certainty and all of that, so that because the way this search database works is it gives you certain options and results in a list, and with a certain level of confidence as to whether that's right or wrong, so it's basically just using some numerical statisticals, probabilities to say, based on the question that you're asking and inside of the database, where are the possible answers, and with what level of certainty am I sure that this is the answer. So it might even give you like a list, two lists, depending on the number that you ask there, and it gives you number based on the probability. So what we're doing over here, we're basically just cleaning all of that up to give you a more readable results, and it will still be a list, by the way, that comes out of this. And then you'll see later on how we take information from that list to clean it up and actually give a human readable response that looks like a response that came from a chatbot. So there's a lot that's happening in the background, but this is basically the functions that's behind it. And when you have time, go read through it, go through these functions to really understand. Like I say, I don't like to copy and paste code that I don't understand what the code is doing. It's very, very important as a developer that even when you use someone else's code, you go through it line by line to learn what the code is doing. That is part of the learning process as a developer. You might not have been able to write this code yourself, somebody wrote it for you, but of course it's very important that you understand what the lines of code mean, right? So after we've done that, let's go back. So this is basically our database functions. As you've seen, now that we've gone through it, this file is the one that helps us to, first of all, get a Redis connection with a database that's going to be installed. We need to install the database later. The next thing it helps us with is loading vectors, which are the ones that work with create the vector fields inside of the index that we're going to build. So we're going to be building indexes, and we're going to be working through different indexes. And keep in mind that you can create multiple indexes in the same database. And this is, if you have just one user, it's okay to put everything in one index, but you might even want to separate your indexes based on the type of data that you're putting in there. Or if you're building an application with multiple users, you definitely want to create an index for each user, because you don't want to mix up the data into one index for all your users, for example, right? That's the best use case for why you want to have different indexes. And then once you've done that, you can query the database. Obviously, this is the function that we actually call at the end, but this function uses this other code that is queries the OpenAI embedding API to actually search the database. All right, so there's a lot that's happening here, but personally I actually prefer this method of creating a personal chat GPT to the LLMA index method, because at least I can understand what's going on. I can see the code, and it's simple to have to do this thing in 2 lines of code, but I don't always like to do that. I prefer, even if it's 100 lines of code, if I know what those lines of code are doing, so that if I need to edit things, for example, let's say I want to change my embeddings model, I now know where to do it. With that LLMA one, I couldn't even figure out how to change my embedding model, for example. What if a better embedding model came in the future and I wanted to tweak that? What if I wanted to tweak the temperatures here and there? I had no idea how to do that, because I had no idea even where the embedding model fits in the entire code, right? So here I can see where everything fits, and if I want to tweak things, for example, I want to get more results, you can tweak it like that and use different ways to get your, to what you need out of this. So we've done the database. So I'm gonna skip this one because this is the Jupyter notebook that takes you through the steps. I'm going to skip the requirements.txt as well. I'm going to let me look at the search.py. This is also a Streamlit app, so I'm going to skip that as well, and I'm going to then go into the transformers. All right, we definitely are going to need the transformers file, and I need to just make sure that I get the spelling correctly. All right, these are your transformers. So let's create a new file and let's call it transformers.py, and let's copy the code that is in here and let us paste that in there. All right, so honestly speaking, I am not going to take you through this file because we are going to be here all day, but there's a lot that is happening in here that talks to exactly how the information gets stored inside of the database as vectors. Okay, so I was having a conversation with a client, and he was saying, I want to be able to input the documents, but also be able to return the documents from the AI. And I was telling them that, what happens is I might have this PDF document like this, right? And the process of actually embedding this in a searchable format for the AI, we're going to be using the embeddings model for that from OpenAI. But what actually happens is we take this document and we extract the text out of it. So basically the same process you can use if you had a website. Like last week we worked with getting information off a website. What I can actually show you is how to edit the code a little bit later on and get website content instead. So probably that's why you can use LLMA index to get the text of the website. But you can get the text of any website and embed that text, because the key is to embed the text. So what happens with this, the steps we're going to take is we're going to take this text and we're going to take the text of the PDF document. And once we've done that, then we're going to encode it. We're going to do a whole lot of other things. But eventually the information gets stored as tokens and vectors inside of there. All right, it doesn't get stored anymore. This document actually ceases to exist. It doesn't exist in this format anymore. So it's not all, you can't then take that information and put that document back together again, okay, to be able to send the document back as an example or something like that, to say which document did you use to get that information, right? So if you go through this code, this is where you sort of take that text and you tokenize it. You build it into chunks, all right, and you use this. We're going to be using this a tick token, I think. Where is it? The tokenizer. I just want to see the tokenizer that gets used over here. It also gets used over there, but I don't see where it's imported at the top there, but it doesn't matter. But the point is you break down that code into tokens, and then you encode it, and then you create chunks, and then you do a whole lot of other things, and then you create vectors, and then you put the chunks inside of the database as vectors or whatever. I'm probably not using the right first, but the key here is that information is broken down into small elements of information, then chunked up together and saved in a searchable format, right? And then the language model then gets that information in that searchable format and then is able to pull it out and then recreate, because it's a language model, is then able to then add those bits and pieces of information into a sentence that actually makes sense. So I might search for something, I might say, what is Bertha Hokong's education? Give me a history of Bertha Hokong's education, or for example. And the information inside of the folder, for example, was saved as bullet points, right? So it will be tokenized into that. But when I search for that information again, the language model is able to take those bullet points and build an actual paragraph and say, well, Bertha actually started at the University of Cape Town, and then she went to the University of Pretoria, and then she went up. You understand what I'm saying? So the language model is very smart and able to take those tokens of information and put them together into a sentence, into a human readable sentence, that it looks like somebody went and read through the CV and gave you an answer, right? That's exactly what we want to be able to develop. That's why this stuff is not really saved as a document as is. That is really all I want you to understand from this transformers.py file. But again, as usual, let's just do what we did over there, all right? And copy all of that, and just underneath over here, just paste that in there. Additional line, all right? That's okay. Then once we've done that, let's go back to our folder and let's see. So we've got the search. We're not going to copy the search. We're not going to use the chat and the chatbot. We're not going to use any of those. Then after this, we can go into our what we call our Jupyter notebook, because everything else happens from here. But before we go back to our Jupyter notebook, let me actually just go back to the Kickstarter, because what we need is inside of the requirements.txt file. All right. So what we need over here is to install all of these things, right, in this exact format. I'm not going to run the entire file because I'm going to try and install it one by one. So let's close this. Let's clear this. And let's try and install this, and try and install the exact version that is over here. Okay, so pip install, and when you do this, make sure that your env is on, because we're installing this inside of the env that we're in. All right, so that's installed. Let's open AI 27. Let's just should we do that? Yeah, pip install. But I don't think that's important. Let's see. All right. Let's install pandas. Okay, let's clear. Let's install pandas. Awesome. Let's install Redis. Okay, pip install Redis. I'm just doing it one by one, so I make sure that they all get installed without errors. But of course, there's a faster way of doing this, and also some smart person is gonna put it in the comment. Why don't you just copy and paste the requirements.txt file and just do pip install requirements.txt at once, which is also another way of doing it. Not even another way, probably the best way of doing it. But I've got my reasons, okay? I don't want to install the things I don't need. So for example, I'm not going to install Streamlit because I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to install term color in Jupyter. Right? But I'm going to, so Streamlit, I'm going to skip this one in term color. I'm going to skip Jupyter, and I'm going to try this one because I'm not sure what this is for. So I'm going to install it anyway. But the things I know for sure I don't need, I'm not going to install. Like, I know for sure I don't need Jupyter, and I know for sure I don't need, did I install requests? I can't remember now if I installed requests. Yeah, I did. I installed requests, but even if I did it twice, it would not be a problem. So I've done epkernel text tract. This is the one that actually takes the information off the PDF. So that's very important. If you are working with a website, for example, you could use Beautiful Soup, for example, to extract information off the website. But text tract will do. And then tick token is the one that you use for tokenizing, or counting the tokens and things like that on the stuff. So pip install. Let's install tick token. Cool, yo. So we've installed all of these, right? The next step is to install the Redis database, because all of this is not going to work if you do not have the Redis database. There are two methods of installing the Redis database. The first method is the probably the fastest method is the one which is actually described inside of the Jupyter notebook provided by OpenAI inside of the cookbook. So if you scroll down a little bit, where they talk about laying the foundations, storage, they do talk about the Redis Stack, and it's very, very important to understand and read this very, very quick. I think I read this like 10 times because Redis is a type of a database, but it has there are different Redis type databases. There is the normal Redis database, there is the Redis server, then there is the Redis Stack server, and I think there's many even more. I'm not sure, but these are the ones I've come across in this tutorial, or that I researched and worked through in this tutorial. I actually use Redis quite a lot, but I use the Redis server, right? I use the Redis server quite a lot in my other applications building, especially for being able to save information that like for example, when you want to do like Django and you want to do like cache, you want to use a cache to cache certain pages so that you don't always go to search the database for certain information. You can just get it off the cache, which speeds up your website. So I use Redis a lot for that. I also use Redis for a lot for doing like background tasks and stuff like that. But this is the first use case that I've come across where I'm using Redis as a search database, where you serve information in there and you use the Redis search functionality, which is apparently a very, very efficient way of searching through bugs and bulks of information. So what we'll be using is the Redis search functionality, and that is not available in all the Redis type databases. It's not available in the standard Redis database. You have to actually get the Redis stack, the Redis stack. So if you look here, if you run this code, it's a Docker run, and it will run a Docker container. It will run the Redis Stack Docker container, which is hosted inside of Docker, where they host all their Docker stuff. And somebody else is managing and running this container, but you can pull the container or the image of the container, and then you can run it on your own machine, and then you will have, just like that, the correct Redis database, right? But for you to do this, you need to install Docker first. So if you for people that want to use this methodology, before you can do this, you need to say you can search for, if you're doing my virtual servers like the way I do it and you're following my tutorials exactly, you can actually search DigitalOcean install Docker, because I've got a very good tutorial of how to install a Docker on Ubuntu 20.04, and I've used this many times on multiple Docker installations. It works like a charm. All right, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to use the Redis version. I don't want to use the Docker version. It's the easiest version, but it's only the easiest version if you already have Docker. Otherwise, you still have to go through the process of installing Docker. You understand? And Docker tends to also take a whole lot of space on your computer, and if you only need Docker for this one thing, right, I would much rather personally not go through the process of installing Docker just so that I can run a Redis Stack database, because I can just install the Redis Stack directly without installing Docker. You understand what I'm saying? And I'll show you that. But other than, if you wanted to go the Docker route, you need to install Docker first. Docker is not by default available on your computer. So by default, if you run this code, you're going to get an error. It will say it doesn't understand the Docker command. You need to install Docker first. So to install Docker, you must go through the steps. I will link this in the description of the video as well, in case you want to. But DigitalOcean tutorials are some of the best well-written tutorials on the internet, and probably one of the reasons why I use DigitalOcean, because of their tutorials. They are so well written, and they're always updated. They're always up to date. This is a nice thing about tutorials. It's hard. People can write a decent tutorial today, but it's outdated in 6 months because stuff has changed. What I like about DigitalOcean tutorials is they're always updated. If you go to the top there, you can pick the language, and then you can pick the Ubuntu version, right, or the different operating system, and you'll get the tutorial for that operating system. So if you're working on Debian, or you're working on 22 Ubuntu, which is the latest one, or you can just search the operating system, and then the tutorial will update to be. So this is what I love about DigitalOcean tutorials, because many of the tutorials online you'll find a good tutorial that worked 5 years ago, because the system has changed. The tutorial gives you errors today because things are different. So make sure you update the version of Ubuntu that you're on. I'm on 20.04, and so that's the one I'll keep. And then so you just update your sudo apt, and then you install that, and then you download that, and then you just copy this and run these things one by one, right? And just do that, and then Docker CE will be running, and then if you get this output, you're good to go. And then you can obviously continue at the bottom here. This is also very important to add yourself into the to add your username into this group, so that when you run commands with Docker, you don't have to use sudo every time, because otherwise this command would also not work. You would have to say sudo docker run or something like that. So at the bottom here, that corrects that. So continue with it and fix that, and make sure that you are inside that group. And then and then these are just like showing you. So step 1 and step 2 is all you need to follow in this tutorial, and I will link it for you below. And then you're done, and then you've installed Docker. And then once you do this and you install Docker, then to get the thing running, you just copy this line of code after Docker runs, and you can do the hello world to test that Docker runs, because they've got a hello world test over here at the bottom that you can run. I think it's here. Yes, there you go. So you can check this and check the hello world runs properly. And if you get to that point and your hello world runs without an issue, then this command will execute without an issue as well. But make sure you don't have Redis installed in your computer to run this. You cannot use both the Docker and the Redis installation, because they use the same port. So this port is going to give you an error if you try to run this command and you also have Docker installed. So there are people that maybe you use that virtual server in the past to do another project, and in that other project perhaps you use the Redis server, not even the Redis Search, some other Redis database for something else. Maybe you're not even running that project anymore, and you've forgotten about it and you've removed it, right? But Redis is still installed in your computer, right? It's still going to be using that port. So if you run this command now, it will error out. It will stop in the middle of the installation, because it will not be able to connect the port, and then you'll have an error with this. And then when you try to now, it's gonna just do a lot of complication. So make sure that when you do this Docker thing, you do not already have Redis installed. If you already have Redis installed, uninstall it using the sudo apt purge command. Sudo apt purge command, yes, and purge that Redis installation first, right? After you've purged it, then come back and do this. Now, the method we're going to use is not using Docker. Personally, because I do not want to install Docker again, because Docker alone takes a whole lot of space on your computer, by the way, right? I'm gonna actually install the Redis server directly. And for that, I did my own little bit of research, and I will link this as well in the description below for you. But these are installations for installing the Redis Stack. Now, this is very, very important, and I want you to pay very close attention. I know people like to say I talk too much, but it's very important that you listen to what I'm saying, because that's why you get the error that you get, and then you don't know how to fix it. And then I get my inbox crowded with errors. Now, listen to this. Redis has different versions and types of the Redis database, right? There is normal Redis, there is Redis server, there is Redis Stack server, there's even Redis, I think JSON, and so many other Redis types of databases, right? When you install Redis, for the use case that we need it here for the search and embedding, we need the Redis Stack server. You see, the one that is called Redis Stack server. So you need to install Redis Stack server, but you cannot just go and run sudo apt-get install Redis Stack server like that on your virtual server. Like here, you can't just go and run that command over here. Let's say, let me copy this command. You can't just run this command. Where is it? Copy. You can't just run this command like this, all right? You're still going to get problems. There's a couple of things you need to do to update your packages to make sure that the correct version is there. So you need to run all of these, you know, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 commands, 3 commands before you run that one, okay? So copy them one by one, all right? So copy this one, right? go to the root of your application. You see, now I'm inside of the ChatGPT where I'm running this thing. So CD with this curly line to go back to the root of your application, right? And then run the first command, right? Like this. I'm not gonna run it because I've already actually installed Redis Stack server. But this is exactly how I did it. So you run that command, and if it asks you a question, just say yes, okay? Then go back and install the keys that you need, all right? So copy the second line. Don't run all of them at the same time. Run the lines one by one. So copy the second line and paste it over there, and then run the second line, all right? And again, like I said, I'm not gonna run it again because I've already run this, but you're not gonna have a problem. Just do that. Then when you're done, this one I can run because there's no error in running the update, all right? Sudo apt-get update, then run this command, all right? And run the update, right? And it's not really important. I mean, it's very, very important for you to do it because you have just updated your packages over there, right? So make sure that you do that. Then once you're done with that, then only can you run this command of sudo apt-get install Redis Stack server, and make sure it's Redis Stack server, because there are different. If you're looking through the internet and you're searching, there is this called Redis server, right? There's many types of Redis databases. That's not, you don't want any of those. You must get the Redis Stack server. That's the one that you need. So after you've done that, you're good to go. There's other things you can do at the bottom to make sure that Redis is running properly. You can ping it. You can do a lot of other things. There's even, if you look at DigitalOcean tutorial on Redis, Ocean install Redis. How to install secure Redis. Don't follow this tutorial, by the way, and I will not link it. I'm just showing you something. After you've done your Redis installation, you can check that the Redis installation is installed properly. You see here, the DigitalOcean tutorial is actually showing you how to install Redis server. But what you want is the Redis Stack server, right? So don't follow this tutorial. But at the bottom, after you've done all of this, right, you can check the status of your Redis server. So you can copy this and paste that and say sudo system status Redis Stack server, right? Because this is just Redis, but because we installed Redis Stack server on this machine, you can do this. You must run this command, okay? And this command, if you run it, if your installation has installed correctly, you should be able to see this service saying it's up, it's active, it's everything is good, doing well, all right? So if you don't see this, or you see an error saying, oh no, we cannot find, there's no service, whatever, you have a problem. So this is a test. And I'm going to copy this test. I'm going to paste it inside of the readme.py. I don't know where to put it. This. Okay, I'm gonna just put another line in here, and I'm gonna say check Redis Stack server installation. I will update this documentation, by the way, all right, so that it's correct. And I'm just gonna paste this in here so that I can talk about this later on and have a look at the documentation, that it's all there, right? And I think this is SH. Cool. So for you to check that the Redis Stack installation went well, you need to run this command and you should get this output. Let me even copy the output. Okay, so you should get this output. very important, because if you do not run this and get this output, it doesn't matter what else you do, your things are not going to run. Okay, they're not going to run, and you're going to have a problem, and then you're going to say, you know, Bertha, your code doesn't work, or this and that. But this is a very important step for you to make sure that at this point, right, at this point, you need to make sure that you get this thing before you can do anything else, because you need to make sure that you've installed Redis properly before you can do anything else. All right, so I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to cd back into where I was working. Cool. So now we've got our Redis installation done. All right, let us go into the Jupyter notebook and go through all the steps of what you've got to do. So now we're going to create another file, and this file, I'm going to call it, this was the AI file, but this one I'm going to call it, I'm going to put all my functions inside of this file. All right, it's going to be like my notebook file, for example. So actually, let's call it notebook.py. All right, inside of this file, I'm going to import and use all the different things that I need over here. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the imports at the top over here. All right, let's just go through the imports and make sure that I have all the files that I'm importing. That's another important step. So when you do all the imports, it's very important to double check that, for example, when you're going to import from database, make sure that you have the database file in here. All right, and if you look at the database file, it's using certain like transformers and all of that, and make sure that they are also imported. But I want to then copy this additional line as well, not inside of the transformers, but inside of the notebook, somewhere in here. Cool, because I need to initiate my OpenAI key like that. Let me just make some space there. All right, so let's go. OpenAI, we know we installed this. OS request we installed. NumPy we installed. Pandas. This TikTok, and we installed TextRack. We installed NumPy as well. Database get Redis connection. So this, let's just double check this. Get Redis connection inside of our database file. There it is. Get Redis connection. So we have that. All right, and then from config, let's do all of that, the chat model and the embeddings and all of that. So we import all of that. I'm not gonna do warnings. I'm not gonna do this either. Pandas set option display column max width. I'm not gonna do that. But I'm going to go into, I'm gonna do this data directory. Okay, I want to just copy this. But the way the Pandas notebook is written, it's like you're running everything step by step, right? But we're going to rework some of that and rewrite it in a Pythonic Flask way of doing functions. Okay, we're not running this like a notebook. So we're going to write these things into different functions based on what the functions are doing. So one of the requirements here, of course, is to list a document inside of a directory, and this directory is called data. So obviously we need a directory called data, and that's where we're going to put all our files. If you look over here, back there, and we go back to Kickstarter, you will see there is a folder called data. And if you click into this folder called data, this is all the PDF files that are actually going to be used to train this chat model. So if you want, you can copy and use these exact files, but I would think you want to do something a bit more personal to make sure this thing is really working, right? So inside of this Kickstarter, I'm going to just recreate this directory called data, right? And then I'm going to just say new folder, and I'm going to call this folder data, like that. So instead of this folder called data, I'm going to put my CV in here, right? So let's actually like do this physically. Home, sort of courses, ChatGPT. This is the folder we're working from. This is the data folder I just created, and I'm just gonna copy this and paste it in here. And make sure it's a PDF document, because we're using text extract, and text extract is only able to really extract text from a PDF file. Of course, you can modify that text extract function to work with anything, like if you wanted to work with a website link or whatever, if you wanted to use to scrap a website, and it's easy to write a function for scrapping a website and just get the text out of it, right? And there's many libraries that can help you with that, including Beautiful Soup. So you could just use that depending on where the information comes from. So you can see over here, here's the file I've just edited in there. There's my CV. So we are going to be extracting information from there. So I'm going to call this dev. I'm going to call it get PDF files, right? And I don't know what the function takes yet. We'll discover that. But let's copy all of this and paste it in here. And let's just go through line by line. Operating system, we've got it. Sorted path join. This data is the location, right? So I'm going to, we could just leave it as data if we wanted, but I'm going to make this a little bit more robust and say enter the location, which means if you wanted, you could have multiple folders. And this again talks to the idea of if you wanted to build an application with many users who have different folders with different data, you could do that as well. So I'll rather feed the location in here, all right, and then curate that directory and then return the PDF files, okay? All right. So let's go back. Let's see the next bits of lines. And then if you print that, return the PDF files, you should get this, right? We'll test this later on. And then this is where we set up the Redis and the Redis client. So let's copy all of this. And as usual, I like to keep my imports at the top of the file. All right, so just copy all of this, including the Redis client, which is get Redis connection. Remember this get Redis connection, you get it over there. And so you can do it like that. And then this Redis client is always available for any function to use. So this is a common function that gets used everywhere. So we can call it like in Python, Pythonic way, or the Pythonic way of doing things, they call it like a global variable. It is a variable that is inside, that is defined at the top of the file, meaning it's available to all the functions, because a lot of the functions are going to use it, right? If I had this in here, we would say this is a local variable. It's only available to this function. So I'm going to keep it as a global variable because it's going to be used a lot. So it will be defined right at the beginning of when you import this file. Same with the OpenAI key. We will then get the Redis client and the Redis connection to use in multiple functions. So every time you have multiple functions that need the same variable, you'd rather create a global variable as opposed to a local variable. And then there's some stuff that's happening in here. Vector dim. All right, so let's just copy that. Let's leave it as a global function as well. All right. The prefix and the prefix is that. So let's copy that. But remember, prefix is already saved inside of that. And let's see if this prefix is somehow imported at the top. It's not. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to instead import the prefix at the top there. And if you go and have a look back at your what we call the config, you'll see that prefix is already defined in the config. So you can actually just import it from there instead of redefining it here again, okay? And let's have a look at the vector dim. Vector dim is not defined in there, but I don't know why it's not defined in there. You could just define it in there and then import it at the top here, but I think it will still work. So I just don't want to import something twice. That is why I'm not going to do that. And vector dim as well, if you look in there, vector dim, it's not there. So what is this vector dim called? 1536. I don't see it over there. So then we can define that in here. All right, and then distance metric, let's look at that. Distance metric is also not defined in there, so let's just copy that as cosine. All right, so let's paste that in there. Cool. And then as you go down, the index name and the vector field name. So here we're creating the index. So the index name is in here. All right, index name. So, and then what else? The vector field name, the content vector, is also in here. Vector field name. So it's called vector field name in here, and it's called vector field name, and it's called vector field name. All right, so cool. So this vector field name and index name, both of these we can actually import from over there. So after the prefix, import that and import the vector field name. All right, and let's just make sure that this vector field name is not, there's two of them, so it's already imported. So let's delete it. And the index name, is it not already? Let's find it. There's only one, so it's not. So I don't know what these guys were doing. Text embedding chunk size, vector field name, and let's see, completions model, is that there inside of our config file? Completion models is there. Embeddings model is there. Chat model is there. Text embedding chunk size. Text embedding chunk size is there. Vector field name, and then the prefix and the index name. The prefix and the index name, they are both in that file. Cool. Then let's continue to create an index. This is all you need. So I'm going to copy all of this and put it inside of a function, and I'm going to call these functions create index. I'm going to say create database index. We don't know what it takes in yet. We'll go through the function line by line and see what it takes in. And that's better. All right, the file name is that text field. File name, that text field is what we're importing at the top over here. That's cool. Numeric field, we're importing at the top there as well. Vector field at the bottom, we're importing at the top. These are just strings. Okay, and then the vector field name, we are importing at the top there. Remember, the vector dim is the one which we defined over here. And the distance metric is what we defined over there as well. And then the fields now is going to be that file name, text chunk index, and text embedding. All right, and then once we've done that, then we need this function over here to actually do that. So so let me rewrite this so that I don't have errors with my try accept. Right, so try to get the Redis client information, right? Print, we're not going to try and print anything, just try to do it, except if you have an exception. All right, as an error. If you have an exception, you can print the error or whatever. Otherwise, if you do have an exception, you can just then recreate the index. So what this function does over here, this function, okay, now we can do that and do that, so that I just want to make sure that my indents are fine. I don't have indent issues. Okay, cool. So basically what happens here is, if you try, and this function is for creating an index, right? And it takes in the index name, right? And this index name, I'd rather actually, Okay, so the index name is already defined over there. Okay, cool. We've got the index name. So it takes in the index name, right? And it uses this Redis client, which we've already initialized at the top. This is why I told you, see the Redis client, we've already initialized at the top there. It takes the Redis client and it runs the ft function to get the info on that index name. If the index does not exist, this function will throw an error, right? So if this function throws an error, then that exception, then you will then instead create the index. And then you'll create the index with the fields or fields. These are the fields over there. The definition is index definition, which we have imported at the top. We should have imported index definition. There you go, index definition. Okay, the prefix is this prefix that we import at the top there, which comes from the config file. And then the index type also we have imported over there, and then we want the index type hash. Okay, so if you run this function, you will create an index, but you will only create an index if it doesn't already exist. That's very important that you check that the index doesn't exist first. So this is actually very well written code. So over here, I will just say at the bottom here, return index name. I don't know, return index name or return true. Yeah, or you don't even have to return anything at all. If there's no error, you know, this function will just run. But I'm used to functions returning something, you know. So what do you want to return here? The name of the index. Perhaps let's return the index name so that you know what index was created. All right, you can even return a string that says instead of returning, actually you can print, just to get feedback, right? Index index name was created successfully. And then you can use the f strings to do that. So this print, actually you want to print it in here, and then over here you could say this index already exists. So if the index already exists, so you print that if you created it, and then yeah, return true. At this point, you'll need to know whether you created it or you just found it already exists. Okay, so we're good with that function. So now we are able to create an index, and yeah, we're able to like build our index structure. So what we call this thing, it's an index structure schema. Yes, schema, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, we are able to build the index schema over here, and after that we then create an index using that schema. And then after we've done that, we can then add the documents into the index. All right, so let's test that. So this lines of code over here, from transformers import handle file string, we need to import it at the top there, and let's just double check that this handle file strings is available inside of the transformers, and there it is. Okay, cool. So we need to import that, and then after we have imported that, then this is the functions. So I'm going to say over here, this step takes time, by the way. It doesn't always take 5 minutes. It takes as much time as the documents that you are trying to embed. All right, so I'm only embedding one PDF file. It will take time, but it will not take that long. So I'm going to create another function here that I'm going to call create embed add documents to index. So here we've created an index, and it's an empty index. So after we created that empty index, we're going to add documents to that index. All right, so let's just just make sure that our what we call our spacings are correct, because we'll get errors if they're not. All right, so PDF path is, remember we got the PDF path at the top there. Let's see. Okay, we don't need to print anything. Oh, PDF files. Yes, of course. We got the PDF files at the top there. So let's copy that and paste it in here. So this function is going to need to take in the PDF files. It'll work on here if you were using the notebook, because everything is actually running on the same thing. So the PDF files is already defined ahead at the top there. But now, because we're going to run this in functions, we need to actually input the PDF files. We're going to need tick token to encode. So let's make sure we've imported tick token at the top. Cool. So this should work. And then we need to process the file. So for file inside of PDF files, and this PDF file is actually a list of PDF files, and I'll show you how that works in the end when we do this. All right. This uses operating system and the data directory. We need to define that. So let's see, where is it? All right, so the data directory is not defined there in PDF file. All right, so let's return this data directory from here as well. Okay, let's return data directory from there, and then to run this, we're gonna run this function to get the PDF files. So let's actually not to do it like that there. Let's do it at the top here and say, let's just call this X. We'll find another name for it. We run this function with the location. You can even define the location over here, or we can have the location go in there. And then once we've done that, we say the data directory, which we need to define, and the PDF files, which we need to define. The PDF files is equals to X at 0. Let's just double check that. So X at 0, because now we're going to return a tuple, which is going to be like we're returning two variables at the same time. So the first variable inside of what we've returned is the PDF files, and the second one is the data directory. So X at 0 is the PDF files, and the data directory is X at 1. So then when you go back here, we'll have a PDF file in PDF files. So we define that PDF files from there, and then we then get the data directory, which is going to be that, and then the PDF file is the iterated step or whatever instance we are in the loop. All right, and then we use now text extract, which is what we've imported at the top there, to process that with the PDF miner. We're getting the raw information of the PDF. So this is where, for example, if you wanted to use a text from a website, right, you could just define that text over here. So you could use whatever beautiful soup or whatever it is to extract the text. You can even use some of the code from last week where we got that LLMA index to get text off a website. And before you use that rest of the steps, as soon as you have the text, then you put it in here. I mean, you actually put the text in there and you decode the text in there, right? So for us today, we're going to use PDF because I'm using the PDF method, but you could use any method. You could find text from anywhere. So if, for example, you were trying to build a real-time, because people, I've thought about how I would do this. Build a real-time search, not search, but like update your ChatGPT with real-time search results. So let's say you were trying to build like a research functionality inside of an app, right? But you wanted to find real-time information of the internet today. So you wanted to say, like, based on the, like, let's say Thabo Bester in South Africa is one of the trending topics, but it's, the information is available today with today's, like if you go and search online and you search Thabo Bester today, right, you'll find all of this information on Thabo Bester from all these different news sources, right? Because this is like recent news. But let's say you wanted to update your model, your ChatGPT model, to be able to surf the net in a way and get you the latest information on Thabo Bester and like summarize all of this right now, right? What you would want to do is use like a real-time web crawler to extract, to do a web search and go into like the top links that you find and extract the content from these links as text, and then take that text and put it into the an embedding model, right, that you will then search from. So right now we are getting the text from a PDF document, but you could get this text from anywhere. But of course, I thought about it in my head. The number of steps of scrapping a website, embedding that data right now and right then. Actually, you wouldn't embed it because embedding would take too long. What you would do, especially with GPT-4, which has more characters, if you look at GPT-4, where is it? I think I had GPT-4 open somewhere here. Did I close it? But GPT-4 has like much more information that it can process, I think up to 8,000 tokens, which is a lot of information, right? So with GPT-4 instead, because GPT-3 is limited with how much information you can put in, this is why we are embedding it. If you were searching just a one-page document, you would just put that into the prompt. You would not need to go through the steps of trying to embed that into a database. You do this because you have a lot of data. So if you wanted to do something that like research, or for example, yes, I would do that. But if I was just like looking through a one-pager website or something like that, I wouldn't even go through this. I could just embed that into the actual prompt of the GPT-4 and get an answer right then like that. You understand? So anyway, back to what we're doing here today. Let us then extract the text, and then we'll handle the file string. And this handle file string, let me just search this function where it's coming from. It's coming from the top there, from the transformers file. So it's coming from over there. All right. So let's do that. PDF file, that's that PDF file. Text is that text over there. Decode that text. The tokenizer is what you've defined at the top over there. The Redis client again is this Redis client that we have defined as a global variable. Where is it? Redis client, there it is. Redis client. The vector field name, let's just make sure we have this imported at the top there, the vector field name, okay? And then the index name as well, we have all of that at the top there. All right, so cool. So now we can do that. We can handle the file string. We can add the documents to the index using the location of the document. So this location over here is the same. The location that gets fed in there is the location of the documents, right? We're going to test all these functions. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it. And then once you've done that, this is a test. This is just a test function to run this test function, just to see the number of documents that's available inside of your index. So this function, what it does is that it just goes into the index and the info of the index to look at the number of documents inside of that index. So when you run this function over here before you create the index, right? If you run this function over here, you're gonna get an error because you have not created the index. So it will tell you there's no index. If you run this function after you create the index over here, you will get 0 because you've created the index but you haven't added anything to the index. If you run this function over here, you should get the number of documents that are in there. It should not be 0. This is also the next check step, right? So I'm going to put this even inside of my readme.py, because this is very, very important. Before you do anything else, make sure that when you check the index, there is documents inside of the index, okay? So check that there is documents in the index. Right. Run this function. Actually, let's do this. Py. So this is a Python file. Okay. Yeah. Okay, run this line inside of a Python environment to check that the index was created and there are documents in the index. Yeah. So this will inside of the Python shell successfully. All right, so run this function. So if you run it the first time, it should give you an error, right? If the index doesn't exist. If the index exists before you add documents, you should see 0 as the number of documents. After you add documents, you should see the number of documents are present inside of this. And this is a good way to test this. This is one of the test steps that you must pass before you even continue doing anything else. Because if you don't pass this step, nothing else will work going forward, because the index either doesn't exist or it doesn't have the documents that you want to train it on. So before you proceed, you must test this. Remember the test steps that I've given you. Go through all of them, because you will have problems later on if you fail the test steps. So now we are going to test our the last function that we're going to use is the function that actually tests, that actually gets the Redis results. So from database, paste that, and then we could even do it like this, because from database is the same file, and you get Redis connection. You can also from database file get Redis results. So let's look for that. There you go. So that function is okay. So we can go and get Redis results from there. And I'm not going to run this. I'm going to skip this actually. Oh no, I'm not going to skip that. Okay, so let's do this. Let's query Redis database. Let's go to the bottom. Query. And then we put in the query there. So this is the query. So let's put it over there. What we can do is that we can use our own query. Let's see if I can still find what I said in there before. No, I'll decide what to ask. I want to ask it which universities did Bertha Kokong study in? This is the query question. So after we get the query question in there, we are going to get the results, and we're gonna use that get Redis result function at the top there, and we're gonna get the Redis client again. The Redis client is that function. Remember, we have defined at the top our global Redis client function, because you see you're using it in so many different functions. It's better if it's a global function. And then we're gonna put in the query. All right, and then after the query, the index name is equals to the index name, right? So in this case, the index name is exactly the same. Once we've done that, we are going to, you can print the results, okay, if you want, and you'll see the results with their level of certainty, You understand? So this is a result and this is a certainty and so forth. All right, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead do this. And what this does is that it's just going to go to the results and just clean them up, because look at this. This is, you don't want to display this to the user or to the chatbot or whatever, because, you know, it just basically goes and hoys and finds all the information it finds around your query and brings that forward. What you actually do, you do is actually get the AI model to go through the results, especially the one with the highest certainty, and browse through the results and answer the question properly. You understand? So this is what this is doing over here. So it creates a summary prompt, which is saying summarize this result in a bullet list to answer the question that the client has sent. Okay, and the question is a search query and the search result, and then the search query is this query, the F1 query that you've entered there, and then the search result is obviously this df result at 0. So this df result at 0, you're gonna have result at 0, result at, because there's two results that are gonna be printed, because if you remember our database function, we asked for 2 results, which I think is enough. So we want the result at 0. If you want, you could even make this 1, or if you want, you could look at the second result and try and see and say, you know, combine 0 and 1 to see if you can get a better answer. It's up to you how you want to work this. And then we use OpenAI, which means we need to initiate our OpenAI with a key, and we create, this is a completion model. So this is not even the chat model. This is a completion model, and it just enters this, text, because it completes this. So it takes the query and the results, and then it just summarizes the results for you in a bullet list. That's all it does. So what we're going to do here is we are going to rework this and not use a completion model at all. All right, because that's not really what we want. What we want is the chat model, because what we want is we want to be able to say, we have this result. So I'm actually going to say, take that result at 0, right? Okay. df result, no. Actually, let's not do it like that. Let's just copy this in there, because this is going to be there. The Redis result. The Redis result is this result df result at 0. Okay, so what I want is, I'm not going to use this at all. You can use this and test this if you want for yourself, but we're not going to use this. What we're going to do is we're going to say our chat model, right? We're going to write a chat prompt, and we're going to use that chat prompt to get like a specific answer that we want. So let's have a look at our AI API there, right? And let's just copy, come back later. Let's copy this whole thing and put it in here, because I want to figure out how to write this thing. Guys, I'm writing this as I go, okay? So I'm thinking on the fly, right? So let's see. We're going to need a system message, right? So let's copy the system message and create a system message there. We're going to say our system message is, let's actually just like take this thing out and call this system message. All right, and let's define the system message here. Okay. All right, so the system message is going to be, you are a helpful AI assistant. All right, you can even give it a personality and all those things if you want, but that's not important. What I want this thing to do is, in fact, we could even get rid of the system message completely. Actually, let's get rid of the system message completely. In fact, this works better without the system message. And I've experimented with a couple of these things, and we're going to get rid of the system message completely. We're going to go straight into the question. Okay? But we need messages to append the question to the messages. So the messages is an empty string. The question is that. The role is the user. There's no system message. We're not going to give it a system message. And then we're going to generate the prompt. Okay. So let's call this prompt the engineering prompt. So it just sounds something really, really smart. Okay. This engineering prompt, we're going to write it here. Let's make some space for it. How you write this prompt is going to make the difference of having a good or a bad application. This is why prompt engineering is becoming an entire field of study on its own. And my predictions are that in future, people are going to be hired just for their ability to write AI prompts. Because people are always asking, oh, is AI going to take our jobs? No, AI is going to create jobs. Here's a new job for you, prompt engineer. Okay, prompt engineering is a whole field of study in its own, because how you write a prompt can mean the difference between having a great application and having a crap application. Because how you instruct the AI is very, very important. I've been building AI applications for a while now, and I can tell you this for a fact. Even a slight change in just the word that you use inside of the prompt produces completely different results. So let's write this prompt exactly the way that we want it. So you are a helpful. Actually, no. Yeah. Let's leave that. Let's have the let's keep the system prompt. Let's keep it. Where's our AI? Let's keep our system prompt. And we're gonna make it very, very simple. All right. And let's remove this. Your name is Karabo. You are a helpful assistant. Let's just keep that. You are a helpful assistant. And then, so we don't have to say you're a helpful assistant again over here. Okay. What I needed to do is generate an answer to the question provided based on the search results provided from the search engine. Based on these search results. Okay. Generate an answer to the question okay. So I'm not going to say provided. Your answer should be based on these search results. Okay. Answer this question. Answer this question. Your answer should be based on these search results. Okay. If you cannot find the answer, attempt to answer the question. No, let me say attempt to answer the question based on this content. If you cannot find the answer, if you cannot answer the question based on the content provided, start by saying our embedded knowledge base did not have the correct answer, but based on my training, I can provide the following answer. Then proceed to answer the question based on your GPT-3 and GPT-4 training data and knowledge. All right, I haven't tested this prompt. You're gonna have to test this prompt, but the key is to write the prompt properly, because what you want it to do is you want to give it a question, and then you want to give it the search results, which is this content from the Redis database, and then you want to tell it to say, attempt to answer the question based on this content. If you cannot find the answer in this content, then say, I cannot find the answer. Because you can also say that. You can say, if you cannot find the answer, just say, oops, I don't have the answer to this question. So it's up to you how you add the prompt. Hence, I'm saying prompt engineering is a whole field of study. It's an engineering in its own. And try different prompts, test different prompts. I've even had to employ the services of ChatGPT to help me write prompts, because sometimes I can put the prompt inside of ChatGPT and tell it what I expect it to do and ask it to rewrite the prompt for me so that it will know what it should do based on the prompt. You understand? So you can actually use ChatGPT to help you write the prompt, but the key is how you write the prompt is very, very important. So I'm going to then, we'll test this prompt here. So the search content is going to be this Redis result. And this and the query is going to be this query. So actually, instead of saying F1 query, actually let's replace this F1 query with just query. Right? Replace all. And so F1 query is just query over there. So answer this question. Attempt to answer the question based on this content. If you cannot answer the question based on the content provided, start by saying our embedded knowledge did not have the correct answer, but based on my training, I can provide the following response. Right? And then proceed to answer the question based on your GPT-4 training, data, and knowledge. Right? And then we're gonna, create the engineering prompt in there, and that is the first, the system prompt. And let's see. So after we've done that, we're gonna then generate the question and return it. Messages append question, yes. Okay, so OpenAI chat completion create. This is the model. Remember, we have the model defined inside of our. We have the model defined, which is in here. So let's stick to defining things properly inside of our config file. So in here, let's just replace this with the model inside of our config, the chat model. The messages is this messages over there, and then we'll try and get the content. If you can't get an answer, oops, you've beat the AI, and return the answer. Okay, so we have written all the lines of code that's required, and I know it's been a long process doing that, but I think it was important to write the code first, and then we will go through the code line by line and test it. And the steps we're going to follow are this. All right, number one, actually this one we can just like check that this produces what you need, but it's not important. We need to define the location, and the location is actually, we can define it as a what we call a high level, what we call variable, like we did the other ones. So where is my variables? So location, actually we can just say data like that. All right, which means the location is that file at the top there. And then we're going to try and run this, get PDF files using the location, and which is the same thing we're going to do over there. But if we do that and we've defined the location at the top like that, then we actually don't need to do that anymore, because then this location is already defined from the high level thingy. So let's then remove it even from there. We don't need to do that anymore. We'll actually get a problem with that, because then we have to define it on the command line. What we can do, we can actually put the query as well at the top. So when you define variables inside of your functions, it's just good practice to put all the variables in one place. Even if you're only using them later in the file, even if you're only using them at the bottom here, it's just good practice to and then this query, actually we can just remove it from there as well. And the prompt, we don't need this function anymore. We're just using it to create the other function. Yeah. And then, yeah, I just want to make sure, just go through my functions again to make sure everything is okay. Cool. So let us push our changes into the virtual server. Adding the embeds. Cool. Now, if we list, you should be able to see the new folder there called data and all the notebook.py. All your files should all be in here now. All right. So I'm going to run a shell. Python, actually you just need to do Python to run a shell. That's it. Now, after I've done that, right, there's a couple of things I need to check inside of my shell. The most important one for me, especially when you get started, is just your Redis connection, that your Redis connection is working fine, right? So in order to do that, say from database, get Redis connection. Let's just run this, because this is important. Okay. Okay, so this is a problem from development config API key. Okay, this is a problem. Okay, so let's fix that. So inside of the database, this is a problem here. So why did we do that, by the way? Yeah, no, this is the wrong way of doing it. So let's do it like this instead. Okay. Cool, so let's exit out of here because we've changed the files. Let's clear this. Let's do Python again, and let's again attempt to import the Redis connection, because this must run without an error. All right, cool. And then I just want to see that my Redis connection works. My Redis client, get Redis connection. That my database works. Perfect. My database works. Then let's run this test function. Remember our test function? Okay, with the index name. We can even have it at the top here if you want. Oh, we do have it at the top here. So basically, if you run this function, you should get an error the first time because the index doesn't exist, right? So let's run this. There you go. Index name is not defined. Okay, I know why this is not defined. So let's do that. Let's clear this. Let's clear that. And let's say from notebook, import everything. Okay, so let's say Python. Okay, from notebook, import everything. Let's import all the functions from notebook. Cool. It's imported the functions without an error, which means even these variables are imported. These variables that you've defined here. Where are they? My variables at the top of the file. So if I say query, for example, it should also have been imported. There you go. And if I say whatever, you know, all the variables defined in here should be imported. So even including the Redis client. So if I then run this function, Redis client, it should give me an error still, but it shouldn't. The error should not be that the index name is not defined. It should be a different error. The error should be that the index has not been created. There's no index called that. All right. And there it is, unknown index name. right? And if you want to know what this unknown index name, what it is, right? Let's paste it. Scholar index is unknown, right? So we are good. This is exactly what we expect to happen. So what we'll do is that let's run this, get PDF files, and see what happens when we run this, because I want to see that my PDF file is there. And my PDF file is, it's a list of these documents, because there's only one document inside of this location. If there was more than one document, it would be a list of all the documents available inside of that file. So these are the ones we're going to embed, and this is the path. You understand? That's the path. Cool. So now the first function you need to run is to create the index. Yeah, so let's create this index. And when we create the index, when we finish creating the index, we should get a return true without an error. And when we run this again, we should see 0, because the index should now be created. It shouldn't give me the error that says the index is not created. So let's then run this function, create database index. True. Index was created successfully. Index was created successfully, which is what we printed over here. Index was created successfully. So if you now run this test again, this time it should tell me that this is 0 documents in the index. It shouldn't give me the same error that the index is unknown, because we've created it now. So now we have an index created. Follow exactly what I'm doing, and as you go along, you should be exactly where I am, or else you're going to have problems. So later on, so now that the index has been created, we can now add the documents to the index. All right, this is what's going to take a bit of time, right? So the PDF files is all of that, and so let's add this and hope we don't get an error, because there's a lot of imports that's happening over here, and let's just make sure that everything was configured properly. Get PDF files take 0 position, but 1 was given. Get PDF file. Oh yeah, this location. Damn it. Okay. File save all. Let's push these changes. Let's exit out of here. Let's clear. Let's do Python again. From, we actually don't need to say from. We just say, yeah, from notebook. Import everything. So import all the functions from here. Let's run this again. This Redis client should still show 0 again. This time it shouldn't show errors. We don't have to create the index every time. Okay, it should show 0. We've already created it before. You created only once, and you can add documents to an index even after you've added documents to it. So you can always update an index. So let's say now I added my CV, and then later on I wanted to add, I don't know, some dissertation that I did about some important topic. I could add that data to the same index as long as the index already exists. You don't have to recreate an index every time. The only reason why you'd want to recreate an index, in my mind, is if you wanted to have, first of all, different fields of study or different types of data that you needed to be able to know which index has which, or if you had an application with multiple users and you didn't want to mix the data together, and user A's data should not mix with user B's data, and so forth and so forth. That's the only time I would do different indexes. But other than that, an index, you could have thousands of documents in one index, as long as it's for the same user and the same type of data. I mean, you don't want to separate it, then it shouldn't be a problem, because that is why the Redis Search and the Redis database is really efficient. You could have thousands and thousands of documents in there, and it will still find what you're looking for very, very quickly. That's the efficiency of that database. That's why we're using it for this functionality. So once you've done that, let's go to add documents to index. So this should work now without an issue. Like I said, this takes time because, but it took, we only had one document in there. If we had 100, it would have taken, I've had this thing running for like an entire 10 minutes before. So it takes time. So you might even want to run it in the background with an executor and everything, so that you don't interrupt the thing with some other, something else happening. But nonetheless, if you now run this again, the number of docs in that index should now indicate the document you've added, right? it shouldn't be 0. It was 0 before. Now running the exact same function is now 9. It was one PDF document, but it actually split it, remember, based on the chunks and all of that, right? So it split it into 9 different documents. Then now you're good, right? So now we should be able to query this database, right? We've created the index, right? And we should be able to get Redis results, right? And in fact, let's just run this without the index, right? So we have the query and the index name. Let's just run this function, right? Querying the database. Let's just see how fast this function runs. Very, very quickly, right? And then let's get these results and see what results it gives me. All right. So what was the question again? Query. Let's look at this query. I can't remember what the question was anymore. The question was, which universities did Bertha study in? Okay. So it gives you the file name and Bertha. This is Bertha's phone number, ID. So it gets a lot of things, but contact whatever's and yeah. So this is not what you want to return in a chat engine, for example. Right? So this is why we are cleaning up this data and saying, answer that question based on this result. So you're asking the ChatGPT, the search functionalities at least summarizes this entire document into the most likely a bunch of data that will have the answer of which universities you went to. And then now you take that that information and you feed it to the GPT, right? In fact, we could even like just print the whole results DF like that. Results DF result like that, without printing 1 and 2 and see the certainties. You know, you can see oh, it's an object and everything. There's a lot in here. Okay, yeah, no, it's fine. It's not gonna print everything because it's too much, but it's fine. So now let's run this whole thing, and now we are now employing. So we're actually using 2 steps. We are searching the Redis database, but we're using the ChatGPT now to communicate, to now, instead of using the data of its own, training, it must use the data of our Redis search from the document we've given it. But we are still using ChatGPT to manage the conversation, because ChatGPT is still an intelligent agent that is able to do the language model. So you see, this is not a language model. This is not telling you, oh, based on your question, these are the answers. A language model takes data, takes a bit of time because now it's using both the chat model. Okay, it's saying our embedded model did not have the correct answer, but based on my training I can provide the following response. Bertha Hokong studied for a BSc engineering. No, actually it did answer the question, because look at this, right? So I'm actually going to remove this from the prompt. Answer this question based on this content. Okay. Attempt to answer the question based on this content. So I'm going to remove all of this from the thing because I'm confusing it, because that's why I'm saying prompt engineering is very, very important. Prompt engineering is everything, right? But you can see it actually answered the question. Bertha Hokong studied for a BSc Chemical Engineering from Cape Town 2003. She later obtained BSc Honors in Process Design from US Cape Town. She also completed her MBA degree at Gordon's Institute. If you look at my CV, right, this is exactly what I did. But in my CV, it's in bullet points. You understand? So the language model takes that and answers it as an actual response to a question, as a language model. So let's remove the stuff at the bottom here. Answer the question based on this content. I'm going to use the word attempt, on purpose, because I want it to sort of like think about, if I cannot answer this, I must say something else, or tell it that I couldn't answer, my attempt failed. So that's why I'm using the word attempt. Very, very, it's a selected word for a reason, okay? All right, attempt, get push. Cool, so I'm going to exit out of this. When I clear that, And then I'm going to run Python again. Then I'm going to say from notebook, import everything. It's going to import everything, including the query. So when I say query database like that, right? When I say query database, the query is still the same. I didn't change the query. The query is exactly the same. The question, where did Bertha attend university? There you go. Bertha studied at the University of Cape Town, where she obtained a BSc Engineering Chemical, You see, now it's answering the question based on, and even has the years. Now you're using ChatGPT to actually, answer a question. And if you look at this and you compare this to the output, if you compare this to this output, where is it? Let me just remind you what that output was, right? I just want to remind you what this output was. This is the Redis output. You understand? So you can't use this in the chat, box. But ChatGPT now takes this Redis output and formulates its answer based on that. So you're still using the language model. So we are using two different models here. The first model we are using is the embedding model. The embedding model is the one that now embeds your content, which is inside of this PDF file, which you've extracted as text, right? It embeds this inside of the database for the search and everything. Then once you've done that, then you use the database to search, and this is what you get from the search. But this is not something you can output into a chat model. So what you do is that you then take this information and you give it to ChatGPT as an input of find the answer in this content. The content is somewhere in this answer. And then it formulates that answer. You understand? So this is how you actually customize your ChatGPT to answer questions based on given input. And the use cases are endless. The one that comes to mind first, this is what I was even thinking about last week, is I've got lots of documentation, on my Scholar Online website. And this Scholar Online documentation, if you go here and you go in here, this is like files and files of documentation. Look at all of that. I have to hire somebody to physically man my chatbot, right? Which is here on my website. This chatbot. Someone has to physically man this chatbot, and someone will ask a stupid question like, how do I sign in? And that someone must manually, yes, this is how you sign in, and answer questions based on documentation. Even things like OKRs, like how do I structure an OKR and all the things I have in here, right? Someone manually has to man the chatbot. But now with my embedding models, I can just embed all of this. This is the number one use case in my mind, is I'm going to embed my entire documentation text, everything that's in here. I'm going to embed it into an index. And then I'm going to create a chatbot that just does exactly what I've done here with my CV when people have questions. So when someone has questions, they're going to come and say, what is your price for, for, if I have 10 users? The information is there in the documentation. The model will just look through and answer it. And this is like an industrial use case. So once you can build something like this, go and build a model, sell it to companies. There's many people that are already trying to, this is going to be one of the next big things, because people are saying, oh no, but is AI going to replace our jobs? Yes, it's going to replace the job of this person who has to do this thing manually, but it'll create a new job for you. Who now you can go to company X and say to them, hey, I can build you a chatbot to just manage your website, inquiries. So instead of having 100 support agents that have to answer questions manually every day, you can just use my chatbot. It's one chatbot to replace 100 chat agents in your that you're paying in salaries. You pay me once for the chatbot, and I build it and train it for you. So people, when they ask questions in the back end, it's this chatbot. And then it answers the question accurately. based on the information that you've given it. So this is an amazing use case, right? This is an amazing use case. So I want to see all the amazing products you're going to build. Of course, I can't show you everything, but I show you enough. What I've shown you is enough for you to build what I'm talking about. The second use case I can think of is e-commerce. You know, we've got websites like Take a Lot, for example, right? Which are like ridiculously huge. I mean, look at this website, right? And people come here and they want to search for something very, very specific. You know, I just want a MacBook and then a lot of the search results are just based on like, you know, I don't know, like, you know, they just don't make sense to users in a way that is user friendly. So the way ChatGPT has been built as like an interface of an agent in the background who actually goes and finds the information for you. Imagine embedding all of these Take a Lot information. Even if this was Amazon, whatever, e-commerce store, imagine embedding all of this information in a index like this, and then creating a chatbot where somebody wants to do shopping on Take a Lot, they just sort of like, you know, hey, what are your prices for, you know, the A1 MacBook, the this and that, and your index search embedding will find a summary of results. Your chatbot will summarize that in a useful manner for a client, including the links. You can even put the links in there and it'll be like, oh, this is also the link where you can immediately go to purchase for something like that. So this is like, the use cases are endless, and this is something you can make money with today. All right. Okay, so the next step is to take what we've done over here. As you can see, we're going to exit out of this. And this is the easiest step of all. We're just going to take this function over here, query Redis database. We're going to rewrite this function. So I'm just going to copy it because I want to keep the function there. I don't want to remove it. So I'm going to say answer custom ChatGPT answer. I just want to rename it because I want to keep the original function as it is. And then over here, I'm going to just enter what I call the query, because I also want to keep this query variable as it is, because I know when you copy and paste and when I share this thing, you know, you want to test the things I've done, and if I change the name of this function, it will be a problem. So this query, the query, just going to paste it in there to get the Redis answer, and we're going to give it to the ChatGPT as well, so that it knows what question it's answering, and then it will provide an answer. Okay, then we're going to go into our app.py, and over here we're going to import. In fact, we're going to say, yeah, import notebook. And then over here, I just want to I don't want to delete this. I want to keep it there so that in future, if I want to go back to the old, I'll know how to do it. Then I'm going to say response answer. So I don't want this to change at all. Is equals to notebook dot our function over here inside of the notebook, which is this function, the query custom GPT response. Let's put that in there, notebook.custom GPT response, and it takes in a prompt. The query is actually this prompt over here. So let's paste that. So let me just remove that and just make sure that this is correct. Okay, then we can put that back on. So basically, we are now, what's going to happen is our chatbot that is sitting there, before when you asked it, it didn't have the answer. And I'm going to actually copy the exact same question that I had over here. Where is it? My query question. Which universities did Bertha Hokong study in? I'm just going to copy the same questions. Right? So let's save all of this. All right. So let's do Python app.py. So this is running, right? Then I'm going to refresh this, and then I'm going to ask it, which universities did Bertha Hokong study in? Now it's still, I haven't pushed the changes. So it's still actually using the AI API generate response, which means it's asking the general ChatGPT engine. And I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to this. All right, I don't have the answer to this. I don't know, which universities Bertha studied in. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to push these changes, and I'm going to move from answering with that to answering with this question, this function. So let's do that. Git add, git commit, integrate index, right? So we've pushed that. You see it's already restarted. So I'm going to refresh this again. Then I'm going to ask it the exact same question, but this time it has data. And let's wait for it. Bertha Hokong studied at the University of Cape Town. She obtained, you understand? You see, now it knows which university I studied in. Okay, let's look at my CV again and see what else we are going to ask it. Starter founders, Coco. Which companies did Bertha is Bertha founder of? Okay, which companies is Bertha Hokong founder of? I want to give it a different question so you can see that I'm not like tricking this thing. Okay, it's actually answering the questions based on the document. Okay, which companies is Bertha Hokong founder of? Okay, so it doesn't know the answer. Okay, where did Bertha work? So the other thing that I wanted to mention at this point is, there you go, based on the information provided. Number one, you don't want it to keep saying based on the information provided. Number two, if it does not find the information in the content, you want it to revert back to answering like a ChatGPT engine. So this is where prompt engineering comes in. This is purely prompt engineering, and I'm not going to do the prompt engineering with you here today. This is your homework. You need to rewrite this prompt in a way that it does what you want. But there is training as well involved, because this question, for example, of which companies I'm a founder of, the information is actually there. You see, right? And you need to then output the Redis output and see what Redis is outputting. And then, maybe it's Redis you need to train, or maybe you need to add something extra, because I did this kind of a project and eventually I actually had to break down my prompts into two and do some extra steps in between, which classified certain questions and so forth, So for example, what you could do, which is a potential solution for this, because you could find that the Redis response itself is the one which actually didn't have the universities I studied on, because Redis didn't understand the question. So normally what you can do is you can add extra steps where you can like classify the question. So you could ask ChatGPT this question, based on this question, please write a Redis query, because what you might find is you need to query Redis in a different way, because you need to, what you want Redis to output. You want Redis to output the universities, the information is there. And so maybe you query it in a different way for Redis to output it, and then you answer it. Another thing you can do is you can append the question based on the so if you know exactly how you want it to answer Redis, instead of now asking ChatGPT two things, of saying, oh, please figure out what it is that this thing wants, and then please generate another prompt, you could just say, please, and this I've done it, I've tried, and it works. So this is your homework to go try at home. You classify this question. You can train this thing based on the type of questions people are going to ask, and then you can classify and say, no, this type of question wants to know the companies that you have worked in, and these are listed as your job things in there, right? And you are a founder. So then what you do is that then you add certain keywords in the question for Redis to be able to output the right answer, so that ChatGPT can find it. That's the second thing. The third thing, which you'll never be able to escape, no matter how well you write your prompt, is what we call training. And even ChatGPT is still training even today, because training now comes from your users and how they use the thing and the answers they get. Because sometimes, depending on how questions are structured, you need to know how to engineer your internal prompts, which are the prompts that are used internally to direct the Redis search. Because directing the Redis search is the key here to finding the right output. Because this blurb that gets output from Redis needs to be correct, right? So you need to think about those kind of things. But this is your homework. I think what I've shown you here is enough. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. And thank you guys very, very much for watching.